Welcome to Bellwether. Thank you for joining episode 100. I've hit the triple digits. We're at episode 100. And it's a bit of a milestone. And it's nice to hit milestones. And I was just cranking along, doing whatever. And I was saying, what am I going to talk about this week? And I said, oh, holy cow. Last week was episode 99. That means that this is episode 100, which is very exciting. And so when I think about what I'm going to talk about today, I'm going to talk about me. And that's fun for me, right? Just once. I'm going to talk about me and all that I've learned doing 100 podcasts and how I look forward to doing 100 more. It's been 100 episodes, slowly over a little over 3 years, 3+ years. I guess it was around March in 21 of the years. But I've been doing about 30 a year, doing about 30 episodes a year. I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot about how to do a podcast. I've learned how to create something consistently. Learning is my thing, so I'll talk to you a little bit about what I learned by doing that. But 100 episodes, some have just been me. Some have been other people. I think if I look back over this, it's a crazy time to just pause. Matter of perspective, where are we? Where am I? From when I first started it to doing, what I'm doing now and how the podcast has changed and how my business has changed. And it's just a fun exercise to pause and take a look around and get that momentary look in the mirror and that momentary bit of perspective and, take a look around. Do you like where you are? Where do you want to be? And where do you want to go? And that's, that's my jam. That's exactly what I like to do. So where have we landed and where are we going? So let's chat. I didn't write down much for this. I like to ramble sometimes, so that's what I'm going to do. But I guess what I'll talk about in three buckets is why I do the podcast, what I've learned doing the podcast, and maybe what I think about, how this will inform me going forward, I guess, in the way I think about things. And I get nice compliments from time to time, not just on the podcast, but people like, or at least some people do, like the way I think about things. And so I'll tell you how I think about things a little bit in terms of the podcast and everything else. So why do I do the podcast? I get a lot of requests for info on how do I start a podcast and why do I do it and all of that stuff. So I do it because it's cathartic for me. And this was really, for years, I was just pining to get back into radio. I had a radio show years ago with a good friend. We did all kinds of stuff, and I did college radio. We did all kinds of fun stuff, and it was just like a cool thing to do. And now it's just a little more accessible where I could just say, screw it, I'll do a radio show. Why not? And that's kind of what the podcast came out of. And if I look back at how it changed over time, it's almost like I was, when I think about it, catharsis and getting things off my chest, but it's also helping me articulate the way I think about things with my clients, the way I think about things with people strategy and business and organizations and how they should be approaching work and their people. And when you think about how quickly things change and what I wish I knew and all of those types of things, that's really what it came down to. So it helped me find my voice and my opinion. And if you read the book, all about, I love the idea of a belief system and all of those things. And it's so cool to be able to have a valid opinion that you've thought through, because if it's a feeling you have and there's logic to it, then it's valid automatically. And that's where most people skip over the validity aspect of other people's opinions, is they don't necessarily give it that validity, where if they just pause for a second, figured out where validity could lie in that, and then use that as a basis for discussion, it's the way people should be. It's the way people should be. I don't know why more people don't listen to me. But if I look back on the last 3 years, everything is the same but different, and it's constant change. People are stressed. The world is changing. This was well before the pandemic when I started this, and the pandemic kind of, changed the topics as it went on. It's fun to look back and think about all of the things that I've talked about. It's almost like a timeline, which probably has more meaning to me than it would to any of you out there listening. But when I look back and see all the topics I had from, I used my social network at the beginning, right? And when I think about, if you're starting to do a podcast, and again, stepping back, it's not just a podcast. It could be anything. It could be a book. It could be, it could be a side hustle. It could be whatever. The first thing to do is just start it, right? Not everybody, it doesn't matter who's listening because nobody's listening. When I first started the podcast, I had a great social network and my friends that came to do it. Dennis talking about lean, Too Sweet, who's going to come back on talking, the pro boxer, Deshaun Too Sweet John's talking about discipline and how do you get off the mat. And he's going to come back and talk about resiliency and those types of things. And so it doesn't really matter who's listening. It's about finding your voice and what it is that you want to say. And you don't have to share it. And when people are looking for purpose, they're looking for things to do, they're looking to make a change. One of the big fears that stops us from trying something new is what the other people will say, or what if I fall flat on my face or whatever. But the nice, beautiful part about a podcast or any of these other things is nobody's really paying attention because nobody knows how to find you. And unless you want to put it out, otherwise you could just practice all of the time and you can do whatever you want. And it's a fun exercise to go through, and you could just test little types of behavior. So, when I think about the social network at the beginning, Dennis, who I just saw recently, who's super cool, Too Sweet, Trish came on and talked about 5 minutes of silence, which is phenomenal. Just these first 4 to 5 to 10 interviews. Eileen Scully on her book about women in male-dominated industries. Those were just fun interviews. And that's why, I kicked it off and said, why the hell not? But if I look at the timeline, I got feedback after all those interviews. They're saying, what about you? What is your opinion? So I started to have a little bit more of my thoughts on things. And so I started doing that balance between myself and the interviews. And that was fun. And by doing that, if you look at my topics that I wanted to talk about, really tells a story of what either I was dealing with or, the world is dealing with. My disdain with the wellness industry was right at the beginning, and it helped me articulate my thoughts on what I actually thought about wellness. It wasn't necessarily me preaching to everybody what wellness should be. Well, I guess it kind of was, but it was almost telling myself, I'm hearing all this noise from other people on what wellness should be. What am I supposed to do for myself? And so that's really what that came. And then it turned into the book and everything else, and learning, how do I want to learn, and what did I learn becoming a coach, and my 20 years at corporate, my time at Columbia, all of these things have manifested into really cool things. And when you pause, stick your head up and say, where am I now? And what am I doing? What's my business offering? And what's my, my marketing, and what's my awareness, and what's my message, and all of those things. If you look back to the beginning, it was really in discovery phase of what I believed and what I wanted my voice to be. And then it transitioned. If you look, all the episodes are on the thing, transition into, beyond me, into helping others. How do you give feedback? How do you manage other people? And we had some interviews on that. And then the Rona hit. We got the nice pandemic, and we were all isolated. So I went right into mental health because we were, a lot of people weren't ready to have those internal conversations. We had no social support. If you got corona, nobody could help you. I don't know. I still don't know how single parents did it, where, you're petrified of your kids getting sick for sure. But if they did get sick and you had a job, you couldn't ask a neighbor to help or family to help because nobody knew what was going on. And so there was a lot of people felt stranded. And so I talked about my challenges from mental health, why I quit drinking, the dark places that I deal with. And I got great feedback from that, where people just needed to hear it. And they were thanking that they weren't the only people feeling that way. And they didn't know how to have, we're so focused externally. They didn't know how to have the conversations inside. Because it was a large connection with a lot of people, but we know our fears and our doubts and everything else. So it's a different type of conversation than the false one we typically give to our colleagues at work, or when we go out networking or any of that. I do believe there are very few people out there who have someone close enough that they can trust to share everything with, which shocks me, the amount of people I've talked to about that. And social network is such an important aspect to find someone you can implicitly trust. And it doesn't have to be a spouse. Like, it doesn't have to be this crazy thing. It doesn't have to be family. It doesn't have to, I know so many people have close-knit families, but they don't use their family in that way. And they have to figure that out. And it's difficult, very, very difficult to do. So that was that whole phase. And now we're trying to come out of the pandemic. It's the new economy. The book came out halfway through it. How do you prepare for this change that we don't know is coming? And how do you manage a virtual workforce? And what are the new skill sets for the new economy? And change management? And what are companies doing from a people strategy perspective? And it's really coming into, really nice. It's a nice little flow, if you will, for anybody on a similar journey as myself. But it's an exciting time, because now what's next is, we just did a recent topic on insecurity, and I have a nice little conversation going on with all of you who are listening on what you want me to talk about, because I feel like now it could be helpful for you. And it's certainly, we have amazing interviews coming up with really interesting people. So I work hard to find really interesting people to get the good ones for you. So I keep notes on what you send to me and what you want me to cover. And as I sketched out notes for this, for 100 episodes on why I do the podcast and everything else, I was reminded of a trip to Belfast, and it was right before the pandemic. And there was a Belfast homecoming event, and it was a brilliant event in Belfast, one of the greatest places that you could visit. Had an event at City Hall, like it was really, really cool. And one of the things, they had a guy talking about how we are all ancestors. And it was a marvelous moment of perspective that resonated very well with me, is that, we think back to what our ancestors did, and we're proud of them, and we have great pride in our history. And just recently we had St. Patrick's Day. Irish Americans love their history and the Irishness that comes with it, and we're very proud of the people who came before us, and they had challenges, and they overcame those challenges. We are currently ancestors for those next generations. And what will they look back and be proud of you for doing? And we all want a legacy. I mean, the podcast isn't going to be a legacy, but as you look at 100, whatever your milestone is, we can stop and look around and say, am I doing what I actually want to do? Whether it's you have kids, whether you don't have kids, whether it's, you're part of a community. We all want to have that legacy, be an ancestor, make some kind of a difference. And that difference doesn't have to be outrageously worldwide. It could be local and it could be small. But no matter the challenges going on in the world, the bigger perspective is that we all are ancestors in some way. And so we all leave a legacy, and we can bring out the best in ourselves so that we can bring out the best in other people. And hopefully this podcast is one little corner where I'm able to help do that. So, that's it. I'm not crying. If you're watching the video, I'm not crying. I actually just got something in my eye. But that's what this is all about. I mean, when we talk about self-development, what's the purpose of self-development? The purpose of self-development is making ourselves the best we could be. It's the secret of life, right? The meaning of life is to make ourselves the best that we could possibly be, so that we can be in service to the people around us. And that's why I focus a lot of these podcasts on development, on what we can learn. What are the important things to focus on? Just, what was it, last week, 2 weeks ago, Marissa talking about what you should be eating. Let's cut the crap. Let's focus on what's best for you and how what you eat can affect your brain and all that other stuff. So those are the things that motivate me and get me going. And so hopefully you'll keep tuning in for the next 100 episodes. Come be a guest on the podcast, I guess. I mean, why not? Well, why not? Why shouldn't I have 500 podcasts? Let's do it all, right? Tell me something interesting to talk about, and I'll have you on the podcast. Because this is, it's just a fun little way to learn. When I first started my business, my tagline, well, not tagline, but it was, my belief was that everyone has something interesting to share. No matter who it is, somebody, somewhere has something very interesting to share. And I still believe that. The challenge that most people have is they don't know how to articulate it, or they don't think it's that big a deal, or they don't, whatever. They're like, oh, it's not that big a deal. I just do this. And people say, holy cow, you do that? That's amazing. Everybody has something really cool to talk about. And everybody is a very interesting person. We just have to give them the space to talk about it. We have to be curious enough to find out about it. And that's what I like to do with this. So with that, thank you for tuning in. If you've listened to all 100, or maybe just 2 or 1, whatever. If this is your first one, go back and listen. They will live forever. Live forever into perpetuity, maybe, until I stop paying the bill, I guess. So thank you for listening. I appreciate it. 100 episodes, much more to come. I'm very excited. And as always, reach out if I can do anything for you. Thanks.